We have the homework solution for page 243, questions 11 through 15. Questions 11 through 15 have this instruction. Write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line that passes through the given point and is parallel to the graph of the given equation. We are going to be given a point, and we need to construct an equation that passes through, okay, a certain point. Okay. All right. So we have question 11. Question 11. We have the point here. I can mark this in red to show you, and I have this equation. Okay. Step 1 is to always find the slope. The original equation is y equals to x plus 4, where the slope is equal to 1. I call the first equation slope m1. The new equation must have a slope of 1 as well, because m1 has to be equal to m2 for it to be a parallel equation. How did I get the 1? The m is referred to as the number that is in front of the variable x here, and we don't normally write it here if it's just 1, but hopefully you see it's also 1. Okay. Now that we have the slope m2 equals to 1, we can use step 2. Use point slope. Why am I using point slope? Because I have a point and now I have a slope. That is why I use point slope. You can use an other equation if that is better, but for the sake of this video I will be showing it using point slope. I label the information. X1 equals to 3, Y1 equals to negative 2. How do I get these points? They fall within this point here. X is the first one in the order pair, Y is the second one in the order pair. And again, M is equal to 1 because we got this information here. My first step is always to label the information. Once I label my information, I write my equation, which is point slope. Y minus y1 equals to m parentheses x minus x1. Make that substitution. So do you see the negative 2 go in here for y1? The m becomes 1 and the x1 becomes 3. I did some simplifying. The subtracting a negative just becomes adding. Then I distribute. 1 times x is 1x. 1 times negative 3 is negative 3. Subtract 2 to both sides. That's the inverse property. Now I get it into slope-intercept form because it looks like y equals to mx plus b. My final equation is y equals to 1x minus 5. This makes sense because right here the slope is the same as the other equation. The only difference is the y-intercept. I am able to construct the equation in slope-intercept form now. There you go. That is your answer to number 11. Let's do the next one. Number 12. Number 12, it gives us this point as well, 4 comma negative 3. The equation is y equals to 3x minus 5. My first step is always to find the slope. We know the original equation is y equals 3x minus 5. We know that the slope here is 3 because that is the number in front of the x. The new equation must also have the slope of 3 because m1 has to be equal to m2 for it to be parallel equations. Next, I should realize I'm going to use point slope because I have a point and I have a slope here. Let me make color code this red for you. Label the information. X1 is 4, Y1 is negative 3, M, which is the slope, is 3. Okay. Write the point slope equation. Make that substitution. Y1 becomes negative 3, M becomes 3, x1 becomes 4. You see x1 equals to 4. Make that substitution. Subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding, so I simplify there. Next, I always distribute. 3 times x is 3x. 3 times 4 is 12. Subtract 3 to both sides because that is the inverse property. Then I have y equals to 3x minus 15. I know this is correct because this is now in slope-intercept form. Okay, and the slope here, 3, matches the slope up here. Okay, that's why these two equations are equal. Alright, next, let's do 13. 0, comma 2 is the point, and the equation is y equals to negative 5x plus 8. I do not want to lose you, I just want to repeat the instructions. Again, it's asking us to write an equation in slope-intercept form for the line that passes through the given point and is parallel to the given graph. Okay. So, I have number 13 here. My first step again is to find the equation. After I find my equation, okay, after I need to find my slope. Step 1 is to find slope. The original equation is y equals to negative 5x plus 8. The slope here is negative 5. So you can pause this because I'm going to ask the question again. What is the new equation that you want? What is that slope? That slope has to be also negative 5. Why is the second slope equal to the first slope? Is because we want them to be parallel equations. Okay. Now you use point slope to rewrite the equation. This is my point. X1 is 0, y1 is 2, and m equals to negative 5. Here again, that is your point, and your slope here is negative 5. Use y minus y1 equals to m parentheses x minus x1. This is point slope equation. Make those substitution, right? Y1 is 2, m equals negative 5, and x1 equals to 0. That's your substitution. Then you want to distribute. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. Negative 5 times 0 is 0. Add 2 to both sides because that is the inverse property. I'm trying to get y alone. And you should get y equals to negative 5x plus 2. This is the equation in slope-intercept form. Next, we have number 14. Number 14 is different because this time the slope here is a fraction. The fact that the slope is a fraction does not change our process. Let me repeat that. Because the slope is a fraction does not change our process. The reason why is because we still go through the same steps. These numbers that you see here, negative 5, right, is really technically a fraction, right? Any whole number, any integer here can just be divisible by 1. You can just divide by 1, right, to make sure it's a fraction, right? So don't freak out because of the fraction. What is the first step? You are correct. It is always to find the slope. The original equation is y equals to negative 1/2 x plus 6. So the slope here is negative 1/2. Negative 1/2 is the slope, right? It is the number in front of the x. The new equation slope has to have the same slope of negative 1 divided by 2 because m1 has to be equal to m2. The slopes have to be the same for the equations to be parallel. And we discovered that to be true when we did our discovery activity in class. Step 2 is to use point slope. The reason we use point slope is we have a point here and we have a slope here. Make our life easier. Always label your information. x1 is negative 4, y1 is 2, and the slope here is negative 1 over 2. You have y minus y1 equals to m parentheses x minus 1. Make your substitution. I'm going to simplify because the subtracting a negative here is the same thing as adding. You should have that. Now you want to distribute. Once I distribute, negative 1/2 times x is negative 1/2 x. Negative 1/2 times 4 is negative 2. Some of you are wondering, how do I get that? Here, let me just show you that on the side right here. Let me do that in red for you. Okay? So, negative 1/2 multiply by the number 4. Please realize that the number 4 is really divided by 1. When you multiply straight across. Negative 1 times 4, okay? Negative 1 times 4 is 4. 2 times 1, don't forget the negative. Negative 1 times 4 is negative 4. 2 times 1 is 2. You can simplify negative 4 over 2 by pulling out the value 2. It becomes negative 2 over 1. Do we ever write it as 2 over 1? No, you can just write it as negative 2. Do you see how that distributive property produces the negative 2? Here's the work if you need to. This is a little review on how to multiply fractions as well. Okay. There you go. Add 2 to both sides. You should have y equals to 1/2, negative 1/2 x plus 0. We don't technically ever want to write that plus 0. I just want to make sure you're aware that it does exist, but you might see it like this as well. Okay, either form of the answer is correct. Number 15. Again, we have the slope negative 2 comma 3 and the equation y equals negative 3 over 4x plus 4. First step is always to find the slope. The original equation is y equals to negative 3 over 4x plus 4. M1 is equal to negative 3 over 4. The new equation for that slope, the M2 has to be equal to negative 3 over 4. Again, M1 has to be equal to M2 for the equations to be parallel, right? M1 is equal to M2 for parallel equations. Step 2, use point slope to write the equation. I have x1 equals to negative 2 right here. Y1 is 3, and m is equal to negative 3 over 4. That's the slope. Okay. Here's my point slope equation. Here's the substitution. Okay. I am doing a little simplification, right? The subtracting a negative is the same thing as adding. Okay. Now I distribute. Negative 3 over 4 times x is negative 3 4x. Negative 3 over 4 times 2 is negative 3 over 2. Now, if some of you are like, I don't know what you mean. Here, let me work that out for you, okay? Let's do that again. Okay. All right. Okay. Let's do that. All right. Let's do that. Okay. Negative 3 times 4 multiply, right? That's what I'm doing here. I'm distributing. Multiply by 2. Again, we don't ever, when we multiply a fraction, we always want to make sure it's over 1, right? We want to make sure it's fraction times fraction, okay? Negative 3 times 2 is negative 6. 4 times 1 is 4. Again, we multiply it straight across. Negative 3 times 2, negative 6. 4 times 1 is 4. What number does 6 and 4 have in common? The number 2. So you can pull out the GCF of 2. In other words, you can simplify it by 2. You can reduce it by a factor of 2. Those are just different ways of saying the same thing. So I can divide the top by 2. And I have to divide the bottom by 2. Okay? This means this breaks down into 3 over 2. Do you see how I got the answer? Alright. Some of you noticed that there is something else that you can do. Okay? Alright. Let's go back to this step and I can show you this a little much better. Alright. What you can do is you can actually reduce it already here. Do you see I have a 2 on top and 4 on bottom? So you can reduce this, right? By a fact, this becomes 1 because you pull out, right? 2 divided by 4 is really what? 1 over 2. Does that make sense? I'm pulling out a fraction of 2. You see how I did it in the end? I divided by 2. I just divide by 2 from the beginning. Negative 3 times 1 is negative 3. And 2 times 1 is 2. Do you see how both ways I still get the same answer? Because again, it doesn't matter if you do it in the end or the beginning. That dividing by 2, pulling out a factor of 2, right? Okay, you still will get the same fraction here. Right, that is how I got this negative 3 over 2, okay, as the slope. Add 3 to both sides because that is the inverse property. Then you get y equals to negative 3 over 4x plus 3 over 2. Some of you are like freaking out. You're like, oh, whoa, how did you do that? That was super hard, right? Like, how did you add a fraction? Again, you can make your life easier by just using a calculator, but let me just show you the mathematics for it, okay? Alright, so we have negative 3 over 2 plus 3. Okay, we could make this 3 over 1. We can't just add it across. We have to get it into the same um, denominator here. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply, right, this by 2. Multiply by 2. Okay, so it becomes negative 3 over 2 plus 3 times 2 is 6, and 1 times 2 is 2. Good? Do you see how it is the same denominator? Now you can add them. If you want an other lesson on like why when we add fractions we have to make sure you get it into the same denominator, I can do that video for you. Okay, but if you don't want to know the explanation and you just want to accept it to be truth, that's perfectly fine as well. Make sure when you add fractions that the denominator or the bottom of the fraction is the same term. Okay, so that's why I multiply by 2 here. So now you just add it across. Negative 3 plus 6 is 3, right? Negative 3 plus 6. And the bottom is the same thing as 2, right? Because you don't add 2 plus 2, no, right? There you go, just 3 over 6. Good? Sorry, 3 over 2. That is how I got the fraction. If some of you are finding it difficult to add fractions, let me know and I can help you out. Or some of you are, right, rather just want to deal with the algebra and don't care about the, numerical, dealing with the fraction, you can also just use a calculator, okay? Both ways work. Here you go. That is your final equation, y equals to negative 3 over 4x plus 2. There you go. That is your homework solution.